Nobody is coming to reward the story of how hard your life has been. The world does not pay for your wound, it pays for the weapon you built from it. You can tell people you were abandoned, ignored, doubted, misunderstood, unsupported. You can explain how your family did not believe in you, how your friends laughed, how society overlooked you, how you had to build with no network, no money, no mentor, and no one opening doors. But to the market, that is not proof. To power, that is not evidence. To money, that is not leverage. It is only a story. And the brutal difference between the rich man and the poor man is not always intelligence. It is not always talent. It is not even always effort. The rich build receipts. The poor tell their story. There is a hidden reason your pain does not move people the way you think it should. It is not because your pain is fake. It is not because your struggle was easy. It is not because the nights you survived meant nothing. It is because pain is invisible until it becomes proof. And the man who does not understand this can lose years of his life trying to be understood by people who only respond to evidence. He keeps explaining instead of documenting. He keeps confessing instead of producing. He keeps asking people to believe in a version of him that has not yet created visible proof. He says, "You do not know what I have been through." But power answers, "What did it produce?" He says, "I had no support." Power answers, "What did you build without it?" He says, "Nobody believed in me." Power answers, "What evidence now makes disbelief expensive?" This is the question that separates emotional men from strategic men. Not emotional because they feel pain. Every man feels pain. Emotional because they believe pain should function as currency. Strategic men understand something colder. The world does not pay for what happened to you, it pays for what you can make happen because of it. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince, "It appears to me more appropriate to follow up the real truth of the matter than the imagination of it." That sentence is the foundation of this entire lesson, not the imagination of fairness, not the fantasy that hard work speaks for itself, not the emotional dream that one day everyone will understand what you carried. The real truth. And the real truth is this: a man without receipts is asking to be trusted on faith. A man with receipts reduces the risk of trusting him. That is why receipts create money. That is why receipts create reputation. That is why receipts create power. Because power does not begin when people feel sorry for you. Power begins when people can no longer deny what you have produced. Look at the creator with low views. He posts videos. Nobody watches. He spends hours editing. Nobody cares. His family thinks he is wasting time. His friends say the niche is too hard. The comments are empty. The analytics are humiliating. At that moment, there are two men inside him. The weak man says, "The algorithm hates me." He says, "People do not understand deep content." He says, "My videos deserve more views." He says, "I work harder than these other creators." He says, "I just need someone to notice me." That man is telling a story. But the strategic man asks different questions. Where did viewers leave? Which title created curiosity? Which thumbnail reduced confusion? Which first sentence failed? Which idea had weak tension? Which video created higher retention? Which pattern can be repeated? That man is building receipts. One man protects his ego. The other man studies reality. One man needs sympathy. The other man needs data. One man says, "Look how much I tried." The other man says, "Here is what the viewer did." This is why Mr. Beast is a useful modern example. Not because every man should copy his content style, not because spectacle is the only path, but because his rise demonstrates one brutal law. Attention can be studied, retention can be engineered, packaging can be tested, viewer behavior can become feedback. The weak creator says, "I tried." The serious creator says, Here is where attention dropped. The weak creator says, I deserve attention. The serious creator says, here is what the audience responded to. The weak creator says, I am talented. The serious creator says, here is the data. Machiavelli would not ask whether the creator felt misunderstood. He would ask, what is the mechanism? Where is the evidence? What did the crowd respond to? What did the crowd ignore? What did the numbers reveal? This is why receipts are ruthless. They remove emotional fog. They make reality visible. They do not care how special you feel. They expose whether your effort has become power. In The Prince, Machiavelli wrote, in the actions of all men, and especially of princes, one judges by the result. That sentence destroys emotional storytelling. The world does not judge the full complexity of your soul. It judges results. Not because that is morally pure, because that is how human systems reduce uncertainty. People do not have time to study your inner war. They do not know what it cost you to wake up. They do not know what you carried. They do not know how many nights you kept moving while nobody believed in you. They see what appears. They judge what is visible. They respond to what can be measured. This is not fair. But Machiavelli did not write for men who need fairness. He wrote for men who need power. So stop identifying as the man who has been through a lot. That identity is too cheap. Every man has been through something. Become the man whose pressure became a system. Become the man whose isolation became skill. Become the man whose effort became evidence. Become the man whose pain became visible proof. The poor man says, look what I survived. The powerful man says, look what I produced. A story asks for sympathy. A receipt demands judgment. That is why weak men fear receipts. Stories can be shaped. Receipts can be tested. Receipts can be tested. A story says, I worked hard. A receipt says, here is what changed. A story says, I am capable. A receipt says, here is the result. A story says, I have potential. A receipt says, here is the evidence. A story says, please believe me. A receipt says, verify me. This distinction decides who gets paid, who gets trusted, who gets remembered, and who stays invisible. Because money rarely moves toward emotional intensity. Money moves toward reduced risk, and receipts reduce risk. If you are a man building with no support, stop confusing motion with progress. You already know you are capable, but your problem is not potential. Your problem is invisible evidence. If you keep explaining your pain, instead of documenting your outcomes, you will become the man everyone says has promise, while other men with clearer proof take the opportunities you wanted. Inside Patreon, you get deeper, unfiltered breakdowns on power, human nature, strategy, and the hidden mechanics behind becoming undeniable, so you can stop begging to be understood and start building leverage that speaks before you do. This is not for men who want comfort. It is for men who are done being invisible. The decision is yours. Now understand what a receipt actually is. A receipt is not a vague claim. It is not a motivational post. It is not telling people you are serious. It is not a long explanation of your intentions. A receipt is structured evidence that makes your value harder to deny. Receipts look like numbers. Revenue increased from one level to another. Views improved from one pattern to another. Retention rose after you changed the hook. Conversion improved after you clarified the offer. Output multiplied after you built a process. Receipts look like before and after. Before, the hook was weak. After, the audience stayed longer. Before, the work was scattered. After, the process was documented. Before, the offer was unclear. After, the buyer understood the result. Receipts look like case studies. The problem, the pressure, the action, the result, the lesson. Receipts look like public breakdowns. You show how you think. You reveal your judgment. You demonstrate pattern recognition. You prove that you understand mechanisms, not just outcomes. Receipts look like screenshots of results. Not fake status, not vanity. Evidence. Receipts look like documented processes. How you researched, how you tested, how you failed, how you adjusted, how the adjustment changed the result. Receipts look like client outcomes. Not, I helped him. What changed, how fast, by what method, under what constraint, with what proof. A poor man says, I am good at this. A strategic man shows the trail. A receipt is not decoration, it is a trust instrument. It answers the silent questions in the mind of the person deciding whether to trust you. Can this man do what he says? Has he done it before? Can he explain the mechanism? Can he repeat the result? Does he reduce risk? This is why receipts create power. They move you from emotional claim to visible evidence, and evidence is harder to dismiss than intention. Stop thinking like an undiscovered genius. That identity protects the ego. It lets you believe the world is wrong while you remain untested. Think like a builder of evidence. The question is not, am I talented? The question is, where is the proof trail? Because once receipts exist, something changes. Money begins to move. Trust begins to move. Opportunity begins to move. But not for the reason most men think. Money does not follow effort. Money follows reduced risk. This is why hard-working men stay poor. They are tired, but they are not trusted. Why does a client pay one man and ignore another? Why does an investor listen to one founder and dismiss another? Why does an employer promote one employee while another sacrifices silently? It is not always morality. It is not always fairness. It is risk. Machiavelli understood that men act from fear and interest. In The Prince, he writes, men have less scruple in offending one who is beloved than one who is feared. This line is often misunderstood. It is not a command to become cruel. It is a warning. Affection without consequence is fragile. If people like you but do not need you, they can ignore you. If people pity you but see no proof, they can dismiss you. If people understand your story but see no outcome, they can move on. Receipts create a different category of respect, not emotional warmth. Practical seriousness. Imagine two men selling the same service. The first says, I am passionate. I work hard. I have been through a lot. I know I can help. The second says, here are 3 examples. Here is the before state. Here is the process. Here is the measurable result. Here is what I would do differently next time. Which man is easier to trust? Not because he is morally better, because he is less risky. The market is not your mother. The market is not your therapist. The market is a risk calculator. It asks, will this work? Can I trust this? Has this worked before? What happens if I choose wrong? Receipts answer these questions before fear kills the deal. This is why poor men misunderstand money. They think money follows suffering. It does not. They think money follows desire. It does not. They think money follows effort, not directly. Money follows value that can be trusted. And trust becomes easier when proof is visible. The man with receipts does not say, please believe I can help. He shows that help already happened. He does not say, give me a chance. He shows evidence that the chance is not blind. He does not say, I deserve more. He shows why paying him is safer than ignoring him. Do not chase money first. Build proof first. Money is not the goal in Machiavellian realism. Money is a byproduct of leverage. Leverage is a byproduct of proof. Proof is a byproduct of disciplined action under pressure. The unsupported man cannot afford to be merely hard-working. He must become verifiable. But if receipts are so powerful, why do so many men avoid them? Why do they keep talking instead of documenting? Because receipts threaten the ego. Poor men avoid receipts because receipts remove the hiding place. A story can protect your pride. A receipt can expose your weakness. This is the hidden reason men over-explain. They are not always trying to communicate. Often they are trying to avoid judgment, because as long as everything remains a story, they can remain the hero. But once numbers appear, the fantasy is tested. Machiavelli writes in Discourses on Livy, "Men never do good unless necessity drives them to it." This is one of his hardest views of human nature. He does not flatter men. He says that without necessity, men drift. Without pressure, they decay. Without structure, they excuse themselves. Without consequences, they remain soft. A man without measurement can lie to himself forever. A man without receipts can always say, "I am trying, I am preparing, I am about to start, I just need support, I just need the right moment, I just need someone to believe." Receipts destroy that fog. They force reality to speak. This is why the poor man prefers emotional storytelling. The story lets him remain impressive without being tested. He can say, "No one believed in me," but never show what he built. He can say, "I work harder than everyone," but never track the output. He can say, "I am talented," but never publish the portfolio. He can say, "I have potential," but potential is the most comfortable prison in the world, because potential lets a man feel superior before he has paid the price. Receipts are humiliating at first. The first numbers are small. The first portfolio is ugly. The first client result is imperfect. The first video has weak retention. The first body transformation is slow. The first public proof may not impress anyone. That is why most men hide. They would rather preserve the fantasy of greatness than confront the evidence of where they actually stand. But that humiliation is not your enemy. It is the doorway. It tells you where the work begins. It tells you what is real. It tells you which part of your identity was built on imagination instead of proof. Machiavelli's political realism is useful here because it removes sentiment. It does not ask, "How do you feel about your potential?" It asks, "What does necessity reveal?" What happens when applause disappears? What happens when support is absent? What happens when no one validates you? What happens when the only thing left is output? This is where the unsupported man is either destroyed or sharpened. No support does not automatically make a man powerful. It only removes the excuse that someone else is coming. After that, he either builds receipts or becomes bitter. You do not need to feel powerful. You need to become measurable. You do not need to sound ambitious. You need to become documented. You do not need to explain your future. You need to create a trail so clear that the future becomes believable. This is where the unsupported man becomes dangerous. Not when he gets angry, when he starts keeping records. But how does a man begin building receipts when he has no support, no network, no audience, no money, and no one opening doors? Machiavelli has an answer. It begins with virtue and fortuna. Fortune will not obey you, but preparation can make you harder to destroy. This is the difference between the man who waits and the man who builds. Machiavelli did not believe men controlled everything. He was not a fantasy thinker. He understood luck, timing, chaos, markets, birth, politics, and war, but he also refused to let fortune become an excuse. In The Prince, he writes, "Fortune is the arbiter of one half of our actions, but that she still leaves us to direct the other half." This is not optimism. This is responsibility without fantasy. You do not control the whole field, But you are not powerless. You may not control who supports you, but you control what you document. You may not control who doubts you, but you control what you produce. You may not control the algorithm, but you control your study of retention, title, thumbnail, hook, pacing, topic, and viewer behavior. You may not control the market, but you control the clarity of your offer, the strength of your proof, and the reduction of risk. Fortune may control part of the game, but receipts belong to your half. Most men use bad fortune as an identity. No support, no network, no rich family, no mentor, no applause, no advantage. All true, and still incomplete. Because Machiavelli would ask, what did necessity force you to build? This is where Jensen Huang and NVIDIA become useful again. NVIDIA did not control when artificial intelligence would explode into public obsession. They did not control the exact timing of the market. They did not control when the world would finally understand the value of accelerated computing, but they controlled their half. CUDA. GPU computing. Developer tools. Hardware. Software. Ecosystem. Infrastructure. In 2006, NVIDIA introduced CUDA, a platform that helped developers use GPUs for general-purpose computing, not only graphics. Later, this became critical to artificial intelligence workloads, deep learning, and the broader computing shift that made NVIDIA central to the artificial intelligence economy. That is a receipt. Not a motivational speech, not a founder confession, not "please believe in our vision." A tool, a platform, a technical pathway, a developer ecosystem, a reason for the future to depend on NVIDIA. Years later, deep learning exploded. AlexNet showed the power of GPUs for neural networks in 2012, and NVIDIA's earlier investment in GPU computing became one of the foundations of the artificial intelligence boom. This is the receipt principle at empire scale. NVIDIA did not simply tell the market, artificial intelligence will be important. They built the shovel before the gold rush became obvious. They built the layer beneath the attention. They built the proof before the crowd understood the prize. That is Machiavellian because it follows preparation, not fantasy. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince, "A wise prince ought never in peaceful times to stand idle, but increase his resources with industry in such a way that they may be available to him in adversity." Peaceful times are when weak men relax. Peaceful times are when strategic men build receipts. When the world was not obsessing over artificial intelligence, NVIDIA was building capability. When the crowd did not understand the battlefield, NVIDIA was preparing the infrastructure. When fortune shifted, NVIDIA had receipts waiting. That is the point. Fortune rewards men who are prepared when the battlefield changes. Not because fortune is kind, because preparation gives chaos less room to destroy you. Virtue is not virtue in the soft moral sense. In Machiavelli, virtue means capacity, force, decisiveness, adaptability, skill, timing, and the ability to shape events instead of merely being shaped by them. Receipts are modern virtue made visible. They show, I adapted, I tested, I improved, I endured, I produced, I converted pressure into output. That is what fortune respects, not your pain, not your excuse, your preparedness. So stop saying, I had no support. Start saying, my lack of support forced me to build proof. Stop saying, no one believed in me. Start saying, good. Belief is no longer the foundation. Stop saying, I was unlucky. Start saying, what part of the field still belongs to me? That is the Machiavellian turn, from complaint to control. But proof alone is not enough. Because proof that no one sees remains weak. So the next law is appearance. Hidden value is treated like no value. This is not fair, it is social reality. Why do less capable men sometimes rise faster? Because they understand appearance before you do. They package, they signal, they frame, they make their value legible. You may have more substance. But if your substance is invisible, the world cannot price it correctly. Machiavelli writes, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few really know what you are." This is not permission to fake value. That is the limitation. If you use appearance without substance, you become a fraud. Reality eventually collects. But if you have substance without appearance, you become invisible. The strategic man builds both, substance and signal, reality and appearance, value and proof. Think of the quiet, competent employee. He works hard, he solves problems, he stays late, he assumes the work will speak for itself. But the work does not speak. The manager is busy, the company is political. The louder co-worker frames the result. The visible man gets the credit. The quiet man goes home resentful. He says, "They should have noticed." No. That sentence is weakness wearing morality. If the result mattered, it needed a receipt, a written summary, a metric, a before and after, a clear claim of contribution, a documented trail. Machiavelli would not tell the man to become louder. He would tell him to control perception. Because perception distributes credit before truth can defend itself. A receipt is not only evidence, it is evidence placed where judgment happens. A portfolio hidden in your hard drive is not a receipt. A case study no one can access is not a receipt. A result you never documented is not a receipt. A process you cannot explain is not a receipt. Receipts must be visible. They must be framed. They must be positioned. They must be available before the opportunity appears. Your website, your channel, your portfolio, your documented transformation, your case studies, your visible thinking, your numbers, your screenshots, your before and after, your process, not vanity. Strategic visibility. Stop thinking visibility is arrogance. Visibility is defense. If you do not frame your value, someone else will frame your absence. If you do not document your results, people will remember only your promises. If you do not control the evidence, you leave your reputation to chance. And reputation is power. Being a good man does not automatically make you respected. Being useful, consistent, and difficult to dismiss does. Machiavelli writes, "A prince should guard himself, above all things, against being despised and hated." Notice the precision. He does not say, "Make everyone love you." He says, "Do not become despised." Despised means weak, unserious, predictable, easy to ignore. This matters in modern life. A man with no receipts can be liked and still despised. People may enjoy him, use him, laugh with him, call him a good guy. But when opportunity appears, they do not think of him. Because he has not built a reputation for outcomes. There is a painful category of man, the useful, invisible man. He helps everyone. He explains everything. He sacrifices quietly. He does not document. He does not negotiate. He does not build public proof. He is loved when convenient and forgotten when decisions are made. This is not always because everyone is evil. It is because power follows memory, and memory follows signals. If your only signal is availability, people remember you as available. If your signal is outcomes, people remember you as valuable. If your signal is receipts, people remember you as low risk. This is why reputation matters more than emotional confession. If you are a serious man, stop performing progress in private while your public evidence stays empty. You already know effort matters, But your real problem is that effort without proof does not travel. If you keep hiding your work, hiding your process, and waiting for someone to notice, you will become useful to others, but invisible to opportunity. Inside Patreon, you get unfiltered lessons on dominant psychology, narrative control, proof building, and strategic self-command, so you can turn private ambition into public leverage. This is not for spectators. It is for men who are willing to be judged by evidence. The decision is yours. Now understand the final trap. Some men think receipts are cold, transactional, or inauthentic. They say, "I just want people to know the real me." Machiavelli would answer, "They will not know the real you until your actions force them to look." If you do not control the narrative, your silence will be interpreted by people who do not understand your war. Unsupported men get misread because they assume truth is self-evident. It is not. Truth must be framed. Proof must be positioned. Value must be made legible. Machiavelli writes, "It is unnecessary for a prince to have all the good qualities, but it is very necessary to appear to have them." This is one of his most controversial ideas. It must not be distorted. He is not saying character is useless. He is saying political judgment is based heavily on appearance, and a man who ignores appearance gets destroyed by perception. Modern application is simple. Do not fake qualities you do not possess, but do not hide qualities you do possess. If you are disciplined, make it visible. If you are skilled, make it legible. If you are serious, make it undeniable. If you are valuable, make it easy to verify. Many men wait for discovery. They think someone will notice, someone will understand. Someone will finally say, "I see how hard you have been working." This is childish. Not because the desire is evil, because the strategy is weak. A man waiting to be discovered has handed control of his future to strangers. A man building receipts controls the narrative before the room forms an opinion. He does not say, "I am a writer." He publishes. He does not say, "I understand business." He breaks down businesses publicly. He does not say, "I can help clients." He shows pliant transformations. He does not say, "I am disciplined." He leaves a trail of repeated execution. Receipts are narrative control. They tell the world how to interpret you, not with begging, not with emotional pressure, with evidence. This is why the rich build receipts, not because they are less emotional, because they understand that emotion without documentation disappears. Documentation compounds. A story fades. A receipt travels. A story depends on your presence. A receipt can speak when you are not in the room. Stop trying to be understood. Start becoming undeniable. The man who needs to be understood is still dependent on mercy. The man with receipts is dependent on evidence. That is a stronger master. Machiavelli's world is not comforting. It is clarifying. He does not say men are naturally fair. He says men are conditional. He does not say good intentions win. He says outcomes are judged. He does not say appearance is irrelevant. He says most men judge by what they see. He does not say fortune is imaginary. He says fortune controls part of life, but not all of it. He does not say discipline is optional. He says preparation matters because chaos eventually comes. The modern law is clear. Your pain is not proof. Your effort is not proof. Your ambition is not proof. Your explanation is not proof. Your potential is not proof. Proof is proof. A receipt is pain converted into evidence. A receipt is effort converted into outcome. A receipt is ambition converted into visible progress. A receipt is discipline converted into a record. A receipt is reputation built before you need it. A receipt is risk reduced for the person deciding whether to trust you. This is why the rich build receipts. They understand that the world does not reward invisible virtue, it rewards visible value. The poor man tells his story because he still wants the world to care. The strategic man builds receipts because he understands the world cares when caring becomes useful. That is cold, but it is freeing, because it means you no longer need to wait. You do not need permission. You do not need applause. You do not need belief. You need output. You need documentation. You need proof. You need visible evidence that your presence changes outcomes. Mr. Beast turned low attention into data. Jensen Huang ignored technology into infrastructure. Neither waited for belief. They built receipts until disbelief became expensive. That is the doctrine. When no one is watching, build. When no one believes, document. When no one supports, produce. When no one claps, measure. When no one opens the door, create proof so strong that the door becomes irrelevant. Do not confess your potential. Do not explain your wound. Do not romanticize your struggle. Do not become addicted to being misunderstood. Your story may be true, but truth without proof is weak in the marketplace of power. Build the receipt, then build another, then another, until your life no longer requires emotional explanation, until the evidence speaks before you do, until disbelief becomes expensive, until ignoring you becomes irrational. That is how the unsupported man becomes undeniable. If you want more philosophy like this, not comfort, not motivation, but Machiavellian realism for men building with zero support, subscribe to Depths of Psyche. Study power, study human nature, study proof, because no one is coming, and that is exactly why you build anyway.